Hi, this is Bruce Rawles. I'm speaking today with Gary Renard and Cindy Lora-Renard, who I'm very a fan of both of their work and big time. And I imagine probably a lot of people listening and watching this are too. And Gary and Cindy have both written books on A Course in Miracles. And surprise, surprise, we thought we'd talk about A Course in Miracles. And in particular, we thought we'd talk about current events and how to use our right-minded perspective to look at what's going on in the world and see things differently. So anyway, welcome Gary and Cindy. It's great to be talking with you again.
Great to be with you too, Bruce.
Great to be with you again. Yeah, thank you for joining with us on this great topic of a right-minded way to look at current events, which that's our topic.
So we're recording this on June 11th in 2020. And if somebody has just emerged from under a rock or a deep jungle in an indigenous culture somewhere or whatever, and isn't aware of what's going on, there's things like pandemics and racial situations and global stuff that seems to be happening in the world. And those would probably be just a couple of things we could touch on and talk about, what A Course in Miracles perspective on all that might be. So do you want to dive in?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I was saying to Cindy as early as March, I was saying, this is turning out to be one messed up year. And boy, it just keeps going that way. It keeps getting even more complicated, which the ego loves. The ego loves things that are complicated. I used to quote it Facebook last week, and it says that the difference between the ego's projection and the Holy Spirit's extension is that the ego seeks to divide, and the Holy Spirit seeks to unite. And man, what has been going on this year is just a great example of that. If it starts off with the virus and all kinds of separation. Now you got to stay separate from other people. And then after a while, that's not good enough in the ego. Now people have to start arguing about things like, do you wear a mask or not? Whose side are you on, the conservatives or the liberals or whatever? It just keeps going. And then, this whole demonstration, once again, it's like you have to choose sides. And not that was difficult for us, but at the same time, as course students, we want to remember to have true empathy with all people, because they're not really people. And, I don't start right off by telling them that if they don't know. But at the same time, everybody is equal in the Holy Spirit's eyes. So we want to think like the Holy Spirit. If we want to return to spirit in our awareness, in our experience, then we want to think the way that the Holy Spirit thinks, which means that we want to include everybody. And I remember it was so interesting earlier this week on Monday, there was a huge demonstration, like a parade, and they were coming down Sunset. We live in West Hollywood, and they were coming down Sunset, and they saw, the cops blocking the intersection of Sunset and Laurel, and our street just happens to be before that. So all 2,000 of them decided to make a left and come right by our house. And so we heard them coming. It's like, we didn't know about it. So it was like, what the hell is that? And we saw them. So everybody in the building practically went out, on the front lawn, and we're all cheering for them, Black Lives Matter and all that. And so, we could empathize with them. Then the next day, the very next day, there was another demonstration around the corner. And on this day, there were like 7 or 8 policemen and policewomen who, for some reason, were standing right in front of our house. And it looked like maybe they were getting ready to go to the demonstration. And I'm thinking, well, I'll leave well enough alone here, and I'll just watch what they're going to do. But that's not good enough for Cindy, right? Cindy, always the peacemaker, decides to walk out there and have a chat with them. right? So I'm looking at this, and all of a sudden Cindy is out there talking to like 7 or 8, police officers, and they're having a good old time, a nice conversation and laughing, and she has her picture taken with them and all that. And that to me was a perfect example of Cindy, because Cindy is like someone who wants to include everybody. And that's exactly what the Course just said about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit does not divide. And of course, the Holy Spirit goes further than that. Ultimately, everywhere the Holy Spirit looks, it sees itself, because it sees oneness everywhere. So it overlooks all these divisions and all these things that the ego is very cleverly and ingeniously laying on us to get us to divide and separate from each other at the level of the mind. And the Holy Spirit just overlooks all of that and joins with everybody in a condition of oneness. And that's really the answer to all of this, is to not get sucked in to all the confusion and the division, and think in terms of oneness and wholeness, and see spirit and innocence everywhere. And if we can do that without exception, then we're doing A Course in Miracles. And if we're not, well, that's okay. It's not a sin. We can just notice that we're not quite doing that and try even harder to make it work.
Exactly. Well said.
Well said.
And the topic was looking. So I think it's just, that looking without condemnation, and noticing when we're in our right minds, and forgiving ourselves when we're not, so we can.
That's right. The Holy Spirit looks on love with everything.
Yeah.
Overlooks anything that isn't that.
Exactly.
We forgot to turn our phone off in the back, so you might hear a ring.
We can overlook that. And since you mentioned since you mentioned that word, I'm actually overlooking the Pacific Ocean here, and the street that we moved to a few years ago is called Overlook. So I get a reminder every day when I look at that sign that I can overlook the dream and look through the illusion with Holy Spirit's help. So yeah.
Well, I want to remind people that our topic is, a right-minded way to look at current events. Mm-hmm. So, when right-mindedness is really, that's what healing is when we're in our right minds, we're in our healing mind. And when the Course says, there's a right-minded way to look at the world, to look is really to overlook, which is mean to forgive. To overlook is to forgive the world that we see. So it doesn't mean that we ignore what's going on around us. In other words, that we're pretending that it doesn't matter, or they're not people that are suffering. It just means we're overlooking the errors of others. And we do that through forgiveness, through forgiving it. And what I wanted to do is just lay a brief foundation before we get even deeper into this for people, just to set the tone of what this means to be in your right mind, but also what the whole purpose of the Course is. Let me just review this. This is from the introduction and the clarification of terms. I'm just going to read a few sections here, and then read a couple things from in the clarification of terms under mind and spirit, and then just go from there about the right mind.
Great.
Yeah. Because this is, again, laying the whole foundation of what the purpose of the Course is. And when we really understand what the purpose of the Course is, we understand how then we can, look at events that might seem disturbing to us, or that pushes our buttons, or tempts us to move into the wrong mind or the ego mind, and then how to make the switch back to the right mind, where the Holy Spirit resides. So I just want to read this. This comes from the first paragraph in the clarification of terms in the introduction. So Jesus is saying this is not a course in philosophical speculation, nor is it concerned with precise terminology. It's concerned only with atonement, or the correction of perception. The means of the atonement is forgiveness. The structure of, quote, individual consciousness is essentially irrelevant, because it's a concept representing the, quote, original error or the original sin. To study the error itself does not lead to correction. If you are indeed to succeed in overlooking the error, so we don't want to analyze the error and make it real, We want to overlook, which the Course is saying is to forgive it, which we'll get into. So it's just this process of overlooking or forgiving at which the Course aims. That's the purpose of the Course, to forgive and overlook errors in others and in ourselves, and to make it about joining and wholeness and oneness. Overlooking error means to not pretend that your body's eyes don't see what's happening. It's to remind yourself that those bodies, those people out there are really perfect spirit. They're really whole and innocent. And the errors are not of them. It's of the ego mind, which is the false self. It's not really who they are, and we can overlook that. Those are just mistakes that call for correction, which means we shift to the right-minded way of looking, which is to forgive and see with Christ's vision people and those events that upset us, which means that we now see what we would think of as injustices, you know, out there in the world, would really be then a call for help, a call for union, a call for love instead. So if we look at, you know, part 1 in the clarification of terms under mind spirit, the Course says right-mindedness listens to the Holy Spirit, forgives the world, and through Christ's vision sees the real world in its place. So this is how we can look at any current event right now, or let's even take a specific example of the officer that appeared to be responsible for the passing of George Floyd, right? Let's take that now. It doesn't mean at this level of the world that there aren't seeming injustices, and it should be dealt with accordingly. In other words, we don't want to let someone who appears to be harming or abuse someone just be allowed to continue that. But at the same time, we can see all people as the same. We can see that all people are calling for love, as that officer was doing, or expressing love. George Floyd appeared to be at the effect or a victim of the officer. And at this level, again, we don't want to ignore that. We don't want to just say, oh, it's okay if someone's abusing someone. Or what we want to do is remember at the mind level that we can look at the situation differently. And then when we're in our right minds, which is the forgiving mind, the Holy Spirit mind, Christ vision that sees all people as really innocent spirit, we can then let the love extend through us and let that be what guides us as to the most appropriate actions to take at the world level. So just because the world, you know, the Course says the world's an illusion, which it is, I just want to make the important point that it doesn't mean we don't do anything and just pretend that, oh, you know, it's an illusion, so it doesn't matter if that person's suffering, or it doesn't mean we don't have compassion for people, you know, or situations. So what we want to do in situations like that is ask ourselves when we're viewing it, where are we in our minds when we're watching it? Are we in our right mind or wrong mind? And then Jesus says in the Course, so to be in the right mind is to see with Christ's vision, and you can forgive it. But then to be in the wrong mind means we're listening to the ego, which makes illusions, perceiving sin, we're making the sin or error real, and we're justifying anger, seeing guilt, disease, and death as real. In this world, the only remaining freedom, he says here, is the freedom of choice. So even in situations that we're viewing with our minds, we can remember as we're reviewing it, again, am I in my wrong mind right now or my right mind? And I can tell which mind I'm in by how I'm feeling. What is my mood? Am I judging? Am I condemning what's going on? No matter what side we're talking about, it's all the same. We have to ask ourselves, you know, the most important thing is no matter what we do, we can do things in the world, but if we're in our right minds and we're doing them, it will be, whatever we do would be for the highest good of all concerned. And we can let go of outcomes and not be attached to what is best, because we don't know what's best, but the Holy Spirit does. And we can still be helpful. And maybe being helpful is just to forgive. That's what we first do. And then let whatever comes through us it will be inspired. And then we might not take action, or we might take action, but it would come from the right mind, and then, so it would be loving. So I think that's the key, is to remember, again, to be in the right mind is to overlook error, and remember that all people, no matter how vicious they can be, to remember that, again, if they're acting out in a way that's vicious, they're calling for love. And so love might take the form of, well, they need to be taken into the police station, and they, need to stop themselves from harming other people. So there are consequences here at this level. At the same time, whatever happens doesn't have to affect the peace of God within me. And I can remember the truth. I'm dreaming a dream. It's my dream. No matter what events are playing out, I get to decide how I'm interpreting this dream with the ego or the Holy Spirit. I get to decide the thoughts I choose. People can't decide that for me. It always comes back to that, to accepting the atonement for myself. That's my only responsibility, no matter what it is I'm viewing. I have other ideas and points in the course I want to make. I want to see if Gary has any, or you have any response to that.
My initial response is, well, we must have been on the same wavelength, because I had a conversation earlier today about a line in chapter 12, that our one remaining freedom as a prisoner of this world is the freedom to choose between the two thought systems, which I'm paraphrasing, of course, but but it's always that choice, and that's the only choice that we need to make, isn't it? Yeah. And then that real choice, choosing the Holy Spirit over the ego, is what really does give us the option to transcend the level confusion, as you were just pointing out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
And
great, beautifully stated. So, yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, that quote is used several different ways in the course. Arden first had me use it in my fourth book, Jesus and Buddha book.
I love that book, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love your sacred geometry book, so I'm your fan too.
Oh, good.
But it's like the one they had me use was the power of decision is your one remaining power as a prisoner in this world. You can decide to see it right. In other words, you can decide to see it with your right mind, Holy Spirit, or your wrong mind, which is the ego. And I think it's good that we're making a distinction between looking and overlooking, because when the ego looks at something, it looks at it with the intention of making it real. The ego wants it to be real.
Yep.
The Holy Spirit, on the other hand, when it looks at something, it looks at it with the intention of not making it real, which is how we want to think. We don't want to make it real, which is why the Course says, forgiveness does not pardon sins and make them real. It sees there was no sin. So there's a great section in the Course, as I'm sure you know, called the correction of error. And the very first line in that section, because, we've already talked about how the Course says be vigilant only for God and his kingdom. In other times we've mentioned that a couple of times. So here's the Course saying, okay, be vigilant only for God and his kingdom. Always choose God and his kingdom. And in that section, the correction of error, it starts off by saying one of my favorite lines, because it says, the alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. I think we all know Course students, especially newer Course students, who are really good at pointing out the ego in somebody else. And no, that's not really doing A Course in Miracles. What you want to do is you want to learn how to overlook the errors of others, and not make them real. Switch to the Holy Spirit. And that is the essence of forgiveness. In fact, that's the way that Jesus healed people, 2,000 years ago. And you can see references to this in the Manual for Teachers, because, he will say, at no time does a teacher of God consider the nature of the illness of the patient. In other words, you don't get specific about what it is that you're healing. You don't want to analyze it and make it real. Just like Jesus said to Helen, can you find light by analyzing the darkness? And which is, by the way, is kind of a smart-ass thing to say to a psychoanalyst. But it's like, the answer is no. you can't make it real. And what Jesus would do when he healed people with an illness was he would overlook the illness, and he would overlook the body, and he would think of that person as being this perfect creation of God that they really were, which is all of it, not part of it, because perfect oneness would have to be everything. The Course says that spirit is not a partial, attribute. So it's everything. It's all of it. It's unlimited. And he would think of them as being nothing less than God. Spirit is the same as God in the Course. It's not an individual thing. So he would overlook the illness and think of them as being what they really are. And if we really want to forgive people, we want to overlook their mistakes, overlook their errors, and think of them as, well, yeah, maybe they think that that's really them, and they think that they're really doing these things, but we know better because we know what they really are. And what they really are is a perfect creation of God that cannot leave heaven, which means that they're still there, which means that they are as God created them, just as the Course says, which means that they are perfect, and there's nothing to forgive. And, oh, by the way, we never really left heaven anyway, because that's the principle of the atonement.
Yeah, exactly. As you were sharing that, I was thinking, in that overlooking, it's sort of like when we're in our right minds, the big dealness meter doesn't even budge. It just the needle doesn't even move. If we're doing it with the Holy Spirit self, right? So something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is it's a good reminder for people that, again, the Course is really to be done at the level of the mind, not the world. So it's really about changing our minds. When something comes up, no matter what it is, mild or big, it's all the same, but that disturbs our peace in some way, right then and there, we're being asked to remember to accept the atonement for ourselves, which is recognizing that nothing truly happened. It really is a dream that we're dreaming. I accept responsibility that I'm dreaming a dream. I'm making the figures act out for me in the dream by my interpretation of what it is I'm seeing. And I can either make it real, the dream figures real, or I can choose again. And I can remember to shift to my right mind and to overlook all error, all forms of separation, all forms the separation takes, and the billions of different forms that it takes, and just do that work first in my mind. And then, just as a reminder, what I do then, once I've made the most important choice first, Holy Spirit or ego, if I'm in my right mind, then I just let go and I trust that the Holy Spirit will guide me. As if when I'm in my right mind, whatever I would do or say would be loving. I don't have to worry about specifics of what to do, what to say, in any situation. I just trust that as I'm my only function, again, accept the atonement for myself. And I want to read this line from, where am I? Chapter 2, under the function of the miracle worker, paragraph 4, where Jesus says, all forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. So let me read that again. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If you do accept it, you are in a position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. Right-mindedness is healing. So we think healing is, well, I'm going to go out and do something, specific, and usually when we have this investment, a strong investment, and with a lot of charge or energy behind it, that I have to do something. A lot of times that's the ego saying this is outrageous and I need to fix this. I need to do something about it, right? So that can be ego, an ego-oriented frame of mind too, if we don't watch carefully where we're coming from when we feel so, right, this investment and that we have to save the world or fix the world. So I watch that. That's part of my practice is I watch that when I have this intense energy come up. I just ask myself again, where is it motivated from? Am I motivated by the ego? And if I am, it's going to feel like, I'm going to have a really intense charge behind it. And that's different than inspiration. Inspiration flows naturally through you, and it's more about you're not attached to any specific outcome. You just have an inspiration, you know, that comes naturally. It's not forced, and it will kind of produce a sense of peace, and it will come from your peaceful right mind. So there's not, again, a sense that if you don't do it, something wrong or bad's going to happen. It just flows as a natural extension of you being in your right mind, And
it's an allowing, isn't it?
yeah, just allowing it to flow naturally. And that's what happens when you are in your right mind, when you choose it. You don't have to worry about what to say or do. And you can, you know, set your goal is to be truly helpful. But we don't have to even know what form that takes. We're just understanding that, hey, I just want to be truly helpful. Holy Spirit, I give this to you. I give this to you, whatever it is that's bothering me or disturbing me. I don't know what's best, and I don't assume I know what's best. And because when we assume we know what's best or what action to take, if there's any, we kind of stop learning because we're assuming that it's coming from, oh, I, Cindy, know what's best. I have no idea, you know, but so I turn it over. And when I do that, I just trust that the Holy Spirit will work through me in whatever ways is for the highest good of all concerned.
Yeah, you know, I follow the news because, I figure because I'm a writer, I should know what's going on in the dream. I should know what's going on in the illusion. And when I first started writing about the Course a long time ago, I read a line in the Course that said that if you would be heard by those who suffer, you must speak their language. You know, so I think I should know what's going on. Now, I don't recommend that people watch the news. I do it because I figure I should, but it's not something that's probably going to make you happy. But I do it as a forgiveness exercise. You know, when the news comes on right away, I know there's going to be something to forgive, because the ego, as the Course says, is ingenious, and it will come up with any way that it can think of to suck you in. And so I'm watching the news and I'm just forgiving the whole time if I can. And if you can do that, if you can forgive when you're watching the news, 95% of which is going to be bad, and then they throw in a positive story at the end to try to cheer you up, but it's too late. You know, so it's like, if you can forgive everything you see on the news, then you're probably getting pretty good at this, because the ego is just great at sucking you in and making you choose sides and having you make it real. And so it's just that the ego has outdone itself this year. Yeah, it's just that it started off, us with, the tragedy of the basketball player.
Kobe Bryant. Yeah.
And things went downhill from there. I mean, it's just LA is just like was in mourning for a month, and then all of a sudden this virus is spreading. And fortunately, I got to go out to a couple of places. I got to go to a couple of restaurants that I always wanted to go to just before the virus hit. And that's my favorite pastime is going to restaurants. Now I can't, and I feel a little itchy, a little antsy. I want to go out to eat. I can't. So that's little things like that. It's all the same.
There's takeout though, right? I mean,
yeah, but it's not quite the same. But the food is. Food is good.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you start to realize, okay, it's all the same. I may not look that way, but if it's all equally untrue, then it's all equally forgivable. That's why there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And I think the more you realize that, the more you really get it. So we try to forgive, and Cindy watches the news with me sometimes. And I'll make comments that may sound like I'm making it real, but I'm not really. And because I know it's not.
I know in your mind you're not making it.
I just say things. So it's like, it's really about, habits. I think that you have to get yourself into the habit of forgiving so much that it's like automatic. You just do it no matter what. When you get to that point, then you're making tremendous progress.
Yeah, it really is a practice, isn't it? Just a repetition, as Arden and Persis say, is, we need the repetition to just notice, to look with the Holy Spirit over and over again until the forgiveness becomes automatic. And I'm thinking that, in a way, even though on the level of form things seem to be kind of whacked out on a order of magnitude, or perhaps a level, unprecedented, it also is sort of an unprecedented opportunity. It occurred to me that, there's an Oriental symbol for was it crisis is danger and opportunity together. And that symbol in the I think it's Japanese character anyway. So it's like, it's also an opportunity to look at the unconscious guilt and the unconscious stuff in our minds on a deeper level, and recognize, okay, well, now maybe with all the stuff going on, I can really look at the social distancing or the personal distancing, and realize, well, what really is apart, and what's really separate in truth? Well, if nothing is separate, then the amount of physical distance between people is really just a hoax, isn't it? I mean, it's really, on the level of form, it seems really important, but on the level of mind, it's like, wait a minute, all minds are joined, and we're all joined, and we can all remember that we're all connected, and we can use this as an opportunity to use a different thought system. And so I think things like this, with Zoom's popularity skyrocketing because people want to stay connected, so we can use things like this as metaphors or symbols for the realization that we never left, and we're all the same, and
Yeah,
ultimately all one, huh?
very good point, Bruce.
Yeah.
And what you were saying, I've noticed during this time that a lot of people are connecting with people that they weren't normally connecting with. I mean, there's blessings in all of this. There's that way of seeing that I can use this as a blessing and as a classroom, but also it's a blessing because it's connecting me with people that maybe I wouldn't normally speak with as much or as often. People are, at least in our circles, I'm noticing people are coming together more, even.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it is kind of about joining in that sense and it is, although our body's eyes are experiencing this separation as far as the physical distancing, you're right. In our minds, we know the truth, though. We're not bodies, we're mind, and minds are truly joined. So we can never really be apart from people.
Exactly.
There's no people anyway, but in your mind, that's what I do in my everyday life as I'm walking around during this time and everybody has masks on and everybody's social distancing. I walk though, but within my mind with the truth. In other words, I just always think of those right-minded ideas, which is this is a trick, this is an illusion, this is part of the script that's playing out right now, but it's nothing to do with reality. I'm one with all. And I just remember that as I'm walking around in my body's eyes, I see the physical distancing, but I don't buy into it. That's what it really means to not make it real. You're not getting caught up or invested in what the body's eyes are showing you.
Yeah.
Not invested in it. You're not making it real. It doesn't have to take away the peace of God in your mind just because your body's eyes are seeing something, specific. You just always can walk the world, but no, you're not of the world. You transcend, be above the battleground, the famous line in the chorus, being above the battleground, and looking at the events going on with Jesus or the Holy Spirit, which gives us such a more peaceful and loving and joining way of dealing with all of this. And we just remember the truth. Peace can return instantly,
It really can.
Yeah.
I saw a really cool little video on Facebook of like a mouse or something like that, maybe a gopher in a little cardboard maze, and I shared it on Facebook earlier today or yesterday anyway. And it was basically this cardboard maze was only like the walls were like maybe 4 or 5 inches tall, and this mouse kind of got the bright idea. It's like, well, metaphorically, like Holy Spirit saying, hey, let's get above the battleground. Let's look at this maze from a little different perspective. And rather than having to go through all the labyrinth of all the corridors in this maze, it just climbed up and said, oh, well, I can see where I'm trying to get to go, and hopped across the walls, top of the walls. And I was thinking, what a great metaphor for, the quantum forgiveness that your books talk about. And it's like, well, we don't have to go through all those
Circuitous routes.
The circuitous roads. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And we can just kind of look. It's like, well, maybe Holy Spirit's help can really give us a little boost here, and we can not skip over steps, but just minimize the need for time, and by really pedal to the metal on the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. The maze analogy is really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how we can be above the battleground, and you can kind of observe things, but we don't have to, specifically get caught up in the specifics of what's happening, but more
Exactly.
be above the battleground, which again, anyone who's listening who might not be familiar with above the battleground, it just means you're remembering your mind, not body. You're returning to the mind and looking at the events with the Holy Spirit, instead of the ego, which means we can look at what's going on without judging it, without the judgment, look and forgive, and that from that place, you're seeing with correct perception, instead of wrong-minded perception, which keeps us rooted in the dream, in the maze. It keeps us stuck here, feeling stuck. So to be above the battleground is to remember that, wait, I'm mind, I have a choice. I have a decision-making mind, I can choose.
I also think it's kind of related to this very esoteric thing that the Course says in the first few pages. I think it's in Revelation, Time, and Miracles. It talks about switching to a vertical axis instead of a horizontal axis. And people see that and it's like, huh?
I love that metaphor. Yeah. Because and the horizontal axis, I've been thinking a lot about. Jeff Siebert from the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, and then Tim and Lynn Corona have just adopted his what they call the wheel of misfortune, and he made a little diagram. It shows all the different things in the world, the different categories of grievances and victimhoods and issues, and there's people, and then there's religion, there's politics, there's sex, drugs, rock and roll. All the different stuff that people have special love-hate relationships, and along this wheel, and we every day we spin the wheel a bunch of times, and different things come up, and it's sort of like the un-merry-go-round that Arden and Persa talk about. So all the things in the world on this horizontal plane that are the propaganda machine spinning around, giving us different forgiveness opportunities, and if we buy into those things and get into the grievances, we're just basically saying, I'm ignoring this rope ladder that Jesus is hanging down from the helicopter, saying you can get above the maze on this vertical axis, and if we get obsessed with trying to fix the outcomes in the dream, we were just going around that wheel, trying to keep every little thing, working the way we think it should, without realizing, wait a minute, maybe there's another way of looking at this.
Yeah, that's also so helpful, Bruce. And I like to share too some of my practices. What helps me in any kind of what I feel could be a challenging time is, I also remember what the Course says about time itself, about, in other words, the script itself, the dimensions of time. And I always remember that if I'm really sticking to the Course, it means the world was over long ago. And if the world was over long ago, it already happened, which every possible scenario that we could think up also happened in that original instant. We chose the separation. If it's already done and over, in that sense, it doesn't really matter what happens in the world. It's more of what we're doing with what happens. I mean, how we're thinking about what happens.
Yep.
So that could sound like blasphemy to the ego to say, what do you mean it doesn't matter what happens in the world? Of course, but the world is already the world. You can't do anything about the world. I mean, it's already done and over. I mean, all the dimensions of time exist. And if it's seen that way, it becomes easier to say, well, I do have a choice then in how I'm seeing it, how I'm looking. That's my go-to kind of thoughts when I remembered, if I'm reacting to the world right now, I'm making a world that was over long ago real again. The tiny mad idea, I'm just making it real for myself over and over again. So it doesn't mean I don't care. It means that I'm just shifting my perception of the world, which is more helpful than perpetuating the dream and making the dream of separation more real over and over again. By reacting with the ego, that makes it real when I'm reacting with the ego. Exactly. So those kind of ideas, when I think of the script is written, they're already done. It doesn't mean you can't switch dimensions of time within the script. You can, and maybe experience a gentler form and your experience could be a more loving experience. That can happen as a result of forgiveness, as long as we just still know it's part of a larger script that's still playing out. And then till the ego's undone, and then you're in the real world, you know, which is the forgiven world. All has been forgiven. There's no more sense of separation or lack or division of any kind. No matter what happens, you're at peace. No matter what happened. And then you, again, whatever you do in the world, it would just be guided by that peace, by the right mind. Yeah.
Yeah. As you're sharing that, I was thinking that one of the corollaries to that's already over is I try to remind myself sometimes if I start to get concerned about what anyone else does or doesn't do, you know, so that first step of forgiveness is bringing it back inside. It's like, wait a minute, if the dream's already over and this was done long ago, then the only one that's playing hooky from perfect oneness is me. Everyone's already, you know, at home, kind of waiting around, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for me to wake up, and I don't have to worry about what anyone else is doing. So the onus is back on my decision maker, choosing the Holy Spirit. And it's like, okay, I guess I better catch up so I can, you know, get back with everyone. So
yeah, that brings us full circle back to accept. Our only function is to accept the atonement for ourselves. So that brings us right back to that. When you say, I'm the one that, yep, exactly, perfect, bringing it full circle to that, to accepting the atonement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I read something else? I have something to read again from the course.
Sure.
And then I'll let you comment.
Yeah, you see, you know, Cindy actually prepares for these things.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to point out. I like to have certain things from the course that I like to read.
I just, you know, show up and wing it, you know, but she actually gets ready. So
I love this because there are certain passages in the course I just love to point out that are just so relevant to what, you know, the conversation is. And so I want to read chapter 3, section 2, miracles as true perception, paragraph 3. When you lack confidence in what someone will do, you are attesting to your belief that he is not in his right mind. This is hardly a miracle-based frame of reference. It also has the disastrous effect of denying the power of the miracle. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right-minded seeing cannot see anything but perfection. Coming back to the right mind. That's what being in the right mind means. You're not seeing anything but total oneness, total perfection, total innocence. I have said, this is Jesus speaking, of course, I have said that only what God creates, or what you create with the same will, has any real existence. This then is all the innocent can see. They do not suffer from distorted perception.
So the least little annoyance, irritation from hangnails to Holocaust is all part of that JFO, just another forgiveness opportunity classroom, isn't it? Yeah.
Here in the world, it's really, I mean, and again, it might sound blasphemous to the ego, but to be able to see all events as the same, because it's all equally untrue, you know, that's not always easy to do sometimes. But the Course is saying if there's no hierarchy of illusions, no order of difficulty in miracles, it's equally forgivable because it's all equally untrue, equally illusory. So again, this only makes sense, you know, forgiveness, as the Course is teaching, it only makes sense when you go above the background, when you think of it as level 1, the ultimate reality, that there's only God, only love. That's the only way this kind of forgiveness can make sense to us. And we kind of look at it from that place.
And that's why we need the Holy Spirit's help every step of the way, because we're on our own. We're just going to totally get off track, huh?
Totally get off, you know, track in that sense. You know, we can get off. I mean, even in the good news, even in that, is that we're always going to be kind of, we'll get back on course eventually. We have to, because the outcome is certain. The outcome is always, if love is absolutely certain. You know, we're all awakening to that. Definitely.
Yeah, it's a happy done deal, huh?
Yeah, happy done deal.
Let's elaborate a little bit about the difference between, you know, reality and unreality. You know, Course in Miracles is not the first teaching in history to ever suggest that there is a reality that is just beyond the veil. Now the veil is illusion. It's not true. So what's not true? Well, first of all, anything that moves is not true.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Course says whatever is true is eternal and cannot change or be changed. So when it's true, it's something that is eternal and it's a constant thing. It's constancy. So this is what Jesus was talking about 2,000 years ago when he used the metaphor of building your house upon the rock instead of the sand. It's what Buddha was talking about when he talked about this, that we're experiencing as being impermanence, something temporary. And the reality is something that is a constant, that you can never lose, you can never change it. It will always be reality. It was the truth a million years ago. It will still be the truth a million years from now. And it doesn't matter what appears to happen. And I think part of the mindset that we want to get into with forgiveness is to realize that no matter what appears to happen, I mean, like if a nuclear bomb went off in New York City and killed a million people or millions, it doesn't really matter, even though that, we're talking about blasphemy to the ego. The truth is, it's not true, and that's why there's no order of difficulty in miracles, and it is forgivable. I'm not saying that it's easy to forgive, but I am saying that what we're seeing is not true. And the remarkable consistency of the Course that you see from beginning to end, as it says that, really is, something that I admire very much, because it never wavers from that. So we, have to expand that idea a little bit about the truth being a constant thing. But the Course, unlike anything else that I've ever seen, and I've been looking for 40 years, nothing else actually brings it home the way the Course does in identifying that constant reality as God, and as God being, the only thing that's true, the ultimate truth, as Arden Person would put it, and as the Course puts it, we say God is, and then we cease to speak, because there is nothing else. And if you can overlook everything and be vigilant only for reality, which is God and His kingdom, and realize that people have never left the kingdom, then you are going a long ways toward being able to apply this kind of forgiveness, because you overlook everything, no matter what it is. And as Arden First have been emphasizing recently, especially in the fourth book, is that we have to be ready to forgive no matter what. In the fourth book, they talked about, you're going to have to contend with genetically engineered viruses and things like that. And I saw that and I said, what the hell is that? And yet the next year, or soon after, here we are contending with the virus. I don't know if it was genetically engineered or not, but I do know that they suggest things that tell us, look, we have to be ready to forgive no matter what appears to happen, no matter how crazy, if Donald Trump is talking on TV and a UFO pops out of his head, we have to be prepared for that. So in other words, we have to be ready to forgive anything. And I like to feel that I am, but then whenever you think that you're ready to forgive anything, the ego will probably come up with something else, because the ego is very good at that. So we have to, get into that mindset, that state of miracle readiness that the Course talks about very early in those first 50 miracles principles, where you're just ready. It's not that you expect something bad to happen, but you know that something bad is going to happen, because that's the nature of this dream. You have good and bad, so that you know that bad is going to be in there somewhere. And so you're just ready for it, and you're ready to forgive no matter what. And when you get ready to forgive no matter what, and it happens, it makes it easier for you to just say, okay, that's the ego, that's my ego. I don't have to take it seriously, and I can overlook it, and I can be vigilant only for God and His kingdom, and think of all people as being what they really are, and where they really are, instead of what the ego would want me to interpret them as being.
Beautiful. Lou
Yeah.
said, I wanted to take your example of it. Let's say, as for the sake of an example of something that might seem really extreme, like a nuclear reactor or bomb going off, that would, in the world level, would seem like this huge, gigantic thing. And my process with that would, if I'm sticking to practicing the principles of the Course, would have to be the same as anything. In other words, I would still if it required forgiveness, I would still see whoever appeared to be the cause of igniting the bomb. I would still have to see that person as calling for love. I would still have to see it like I would anybody else calling for love. I would still be required to look at that with non-judgment. Remember that, look, this is my dream. It doesn't mean I'm responsible for other people's behavior in the dream, but I am responsible for sight, as the Course says, for, again, how I'm even perceiving that. It's no different than anything else. So my process would be just that. It would be, yes, do what I can to take care of myself, don't deny that. But at the mind level, I'm looking at it again with my right mind, which would bring peace much more quickly than if I was making it much more real for myself by looking at it with the ego, which is really the teacher of pain. And it reinforces that pain and reinforces the solidness that we feel the dream is the solid, hard place. So that would be my practices. If forgiveness is necessary, I would do the steps. Remember that this is a call for love, and that my response in some way would be loving. And maybe that response would just be that I'm just forgiving and looking at all this with non-judgment and knowing that everything is either an expression of love or a call for love. And then let that sit and trust the process. Really trust and give it to the Holy Spirit. And that's part of the practice, is that the goal of the Course is really the attainment of true peace. In other words, regardless of what's happening, again, no matter how big or small, I can choose peace instead of this. I can, so I just want to give people, more of a personal example. Just last night, I got up in the middle of the night because I had to go to the bathroom. I'm really groggy because I was coming out of a dream. So I'm kind of still in the dream. I'm stumbling to the bathroom. I ran right into the wall, right into the door, smacked, like really hard. I mean, really hard. It was just, and I was like, oh, and my nose, a gush of blood came out of my nose. Okay. And I'm sitting here going, oh my God, my nose is bleeding. I just ran into the door, and Gary's sort of out of it in the bed, like, oh, are you okay? and I'm like, yeah, I think I am, but blood is gushing out of my nose right now. So I just want to share with you my process, okay? Because again, it doesn't matter what form, what happens. It matters what you do with what happens, what you're thinking. So what happened was I think that could have been worse, number one, if I hadn't been practicing forgiveness all this time, undoing more layers of unconscious guilt. It would have hurt, and it should have hurt a lot more. It was more just shocking than anything else. I just was kind of shocked, but it didn't really hurt. So I just dealt with it physically. I got a tissue and all that. And I remembered, I went back to bed immediately, laid down, immediately remembered that, the guiltless mind cannot suffer. I'm not a body, I'm free, I'm still as God created me. Sin cannot exist. The body is outside me and not my concern. Holy Spirit, I give this to you. Nothing really happened. I'm not guilty of anything. I never separated from God. And so I did this thought process in my mind, it wasn't long, just kind of a brief series of right-minded thoughts. And I turned it over to the Holy Spirit. And I trusted that, and I decided that I would be well. I could be well regardless of what's happening to my body physically. And I said, I'm deciding to be peaceful. I'm deciding to be well. When I wake up in the morning, I'm deciding to wake up, again, not judging anything, just recognize I'm waking up to another dream. So I did that. And when I woke up this morning, it was like nothing happened. Everything was like, normal. And I can honestly say that if I was looking that, and I got really caught up in that, and I was really, really chose to suffer, or just making it very real for myself, and that the body is real, it would have been a whole different experience. So I just wanted to share like a personal example of how I even worked something like that. And that I just remembered the truth. And it doesn't mean maybe sometimes you might not feel something in the body. It just means that you can still look at it correctly, though. And remember that Pain is in the mind, not the body. And I can change my mind about this. So this can be, used with anything that's going on in the world, though. You just stop, you catch yourself, and you remember the truth and the best you can in those moments. When something shocks you, or something, disturbs your peace, or doesn't matter what it is. It's just about coming back and catching yourself if you're looking at it with the ego, and that you can choose again. There's another way I can see this or look at this. So I just wanted to share that because
that's great.
Yeah.
Because
That's really helpful. Yeah.
as we go along, and we keep on doing the ego, and there's less guilt in the mind because all pain is a function of guilt. And as the Course says, the guiltless mind cannot suffer. I remember the first time Arden Persa quoted that line to me, the guiltless mind cannot suffer. And I said, well, yeah, but what about me? And it's like, as you go along and you're undoing the ego, I've gotten into situations like little accidents where I, hurt myself, and it should have hurt, but it didn't. And that'll happen to you, and you'll think, well, that's strange. That should hurt, but it doesn't. But when you think about it, it's not really any different than psychological pain, because you're going to be in situations where you're going to get into a place where something happens that used to bother you, and it used to upset you, and then it happens, and it doesn't upset you. And you'll think, well, yeah, that's strange because that used to bother me. That used to upset me. And now it's not. I'm peaceful instead. And at first, it's kind of like intermittent. You go back and forth. It's not going to be constant at first. So sometimes you'll hurt yourself and it'll hurt. Sometimes you'll hurt yourself and it doesn't hurt. And it's the same psychologically. Sometimes something will bother you and sometimes it won't bother you. But as you keep going along and you keep on doing the ego, you kind of like are allowing the Holy Spirit to dominate your mind to the point where you're going to get to where it doesn't bother you and it never bothers you and it never hurts you. And when you get to that point, you're starting to become like Jesus. You're starting to get to the point where, well, nothing can disturb my peace of mind. Mm-hmm. And you start kind of like rethinking some of these lines from the Course that you've been thinking about for years, but they become more and more true for you. Like, I am as God created me. His Son can suffer nothing. And I am his Son. And by the way, if I am as God created me, then that means that I'm still exactly the same as God, because God doesn't do different. God doesn't make different things and have with distinctions between them. It's all perfect oneness, which is, in fact, the Course's definition of heaven. So as you go along, all these things you've been learning in the Course, they just become more and more true for you. And you keep getting them on deeper and deeper levels. And it's a great process to go through. It's something that is well worth doing. It's fun to know the truth. It's entertaining sometimes. So it's not expensive. What's the course cost? $30, and you get 30 years, 40 years out. That's pretty cheap. So I'm just so grateful for my life with the Course, because if I didn't have the Course, I think my life would have been kind of sad. And instead, it's been just something that turned out to be really great.
Good point. I think life is sad when we're identifying with the ego. That's sadness right there. If I feel sad, and that's a feeling all of us can feel from time to time, or maybe have felt, but if you feel sad or lonely, when you remember that's ego identification. Doesn't mean we're not going to feel it sometimes. You can be gentle and patient with yourself and kind, but we'll remember what it is, though. I'm feeling sad because I'm identifying with the ego, the teacher of sadness, the teacher of pain, the teacher of separation, which breeds sadness, loneliness. So I don't have to keep identifying with that. That's not what I am. I can choose again. Here comes the right mind. And the right-mindedness is correction for wrong-mindedness. It's correction for wrong-minded thinking. Wrong-minded thinking is what makes us feel fear. And all the different feelings or emotions that come from fear, that's wrong-mindedness. It doesn't mean we're not going to feel it sometimes, and we should just forgive it when that happens. But we can do that without judging ourselves for that. And that's probably the most important thing, is non-judgment. in the Course, because we're judging it, we're making it very real for ourselves, or we're judging ourselves or somebody else. That causes us to lose peace when we judge the dream and the figures in our dream. So we want to gently make that shift, you know, and it's all, that's doing the work right there. If we can just look, which again merely means to overlook error and judgment and all of that, but look without the judgment,
Yeah.
and choose again, make the shift, recognize that the outer world, the outer pandemic that we're seeing is a reflection of the inner pandemic in the mind. You know, the outer world is a pictorial representation of what's in our mind, because cause and effect are one. They're not separate from each other. So when we remember that too, that the world we're seeing is an effect of the mind. It's not the cause of anything. It's not the decision maker of anything. It's just the screen that we're projecting on to a screen. Then we can remember that, put cause in its proper place. That's in the mind, in my mind, that I can choose again, you know, make a different choice, how I'm looking at the dream that I'm seeing. And that's my salvation. Choosing the Holy Spirit is my salvation. You know, so that's what corrects the wrong-minded perception of the world that we all made, you know, from the ego mind.
It's that choice again, that simple little switch in the mind and the decision maker, isn't it? Yeah, as you were sharing that, I was thinking, you know, that there's an acronym that I've been using lately that I figure Holy Spirit is helping me to remember to not take it seriously. So that I use the SSSS, which is the silly, seemingly separate self, and if I can look at that without judgment, without condemnation, and just say, oh, there goes that Bruce character, that little dream figure, doing its thing, and if I cannot, you know, remember to identify with Spirit instead of that silly, seemingly separate self. And all of its issues and concerns and worries and stuff, and its big deal things, and just kind of not derisively, but just sort of gently look at it and smile and just, oh yeah, okay. There that thing goes again. And in time, you know, we kind of let go of it, don't we? And
Yeah.
it becomes easier and easier, like you were both sharing.
Yeah. So, you know, I just want to remind the people who are, you know, watching this of the importance of forgiveness. And the reason I say that is because I've been to study groups, you know, they'll talk about the Course for an hour and a half, and you won't hear the word forgiveness mentioned once in the whole discussion. And I've seen Course teachers talk about the Course, teach the Course, and never use the word forgiveness once in the time that they're speaking. And that just shows you how good the ego is at what it does. Because the ego is so great at pulling the wool over people's eyes, making them not see what the Course is saying. If you actually realize that the Course was about forgiveness, then it's not hard to spot it all the way through the Course. It's everywhere, all the way through the Course, and yet many people don't see it. So, you know, I want people to know that if you're not doing forgiveness, you're not doing A Course in Miracles. And you want to get as good at it as you can, and you want to listen to the teachers who do talk about, you know, forgiveness. And I don't just mean Cindy and I and my sister-in-law Jackie. You know, there are others, maybe two others. And it's like, I'm kidding, but you know, Ken Wapnick, of course. Bob Rosenthal, excellent. You know, like we've seen him speak, and he's terrific. And it's like, but you want to go with the teachers who are talking about forgiveness and true forgiveness, not the kind of forgiveness that makes it real, you know, the kind of forgiveness that doesn't make it real. And that's what the Course is about. And I always like to emphasize that at some point, because I don't think that people are really getting that from most of the teachers who are teaching the Course.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. I mean, the Course talks a lot about forgiveness is the means of the atonement. So
it offers everything I want.
Everything I want, right? Well,
the adjacent lesson.
That's it right there. So
Yeah.
that's true.
I got one for you. Of course, says forgiveness is the central theme that runs throughout salvation, holding all of its parts in meaningful relationships. The Course it runs directed, and its outcome sure. So, you know, forgiveness is the central theme of the Course. And you want to learn it, but you also want to do it. And it's like the old Chinese proverb, to know and yet not do is to not yet know. It's like you got to do it. And that is the course, is in the application, in doing.
I want to tell everybody, Bruce, too, you are always very uncompromising with the course, the message. So it's nice to have more people.
I'm learning. or unlearning, perhaps, is maybe the better phrase, right?
Okay, we all are.
Exactly.
But you do, this is just for people who really, truly want the pure course. Forgiveness is the central teaching. And Bruce, you do that. You do stick to.
Well, it's
so I think that's wonderful. Now, and again, it doesn't matter. There's no judgment on it, but just for those that are really, what is the course really saying? It's nice to have people to kind of point people toward if that's what they really want. That's all. Yeah.
There's a lot of mutual appreciation here, so
yeah.
needless to say. So.
Yeah.
So I'm not judging people. I'm just telling them that they really need to get their shit together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we're all learning to undo the we-they paradigm with the forgiveness classroom that we're given, and it does seem like this year has been a particularly simultaneously. It almost seems doesn't like that when things seem to get stranger on the level of form, they also there is an opportunity again to notice the mind more deeply and just really pay attention to.
Oh, definitely. The ego loves this. It's like, there have been reports of, people reporting psychological distress, depression, anger. The cases are up like 30% since these lockdowns started. And, the financial stress that people are under now, it's like you got all these forces working on people that's making it very, very difficult for them. So if forgiveness wasn't hard enough in normal times, and now it's getting even harder. And that's where we need to remember that it's still all the same, no matter what it looks like. It's still all the same, which means that it's all equally forgivable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fact that it's equally forgivable doesn't mean that it's all easy, but it is doable. The Holy Spirit wouldn't give us a course, and give us, a plan and a job that we couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
It is doable. Not easy, but doable.
Exactly.
One final thought. If anybody is having difficulty with this time during this time and kind of being at home more, a lockdown and all the events going on and the protests and all of that, Jesus makes a point in the Course too that if everything was perfect all the time in the world, there'd be no motivation to go within. In other words, the world is not made to be perfect, but it can be used as an opportunity to explore, right? Your mind, go within, and it's safe to go within. The ego will tell us it'll be annihilated if it goes within and chooses the right mind or chooses love, chooses God. That's the end of the ego. But you don't have to listen to the ego. Remember, it's safe to go within because the Holy Spirit is also in your mind. And you can get in touch with that quiet center. And, if you feel lonely, if you feel that I'm at home more, I'm not talking to people, it can be a really beautiful classroom and an opportunity to do just that. Explore the inner realms a little more, whatever that means for you. It can be a blessing, and, it seems like when you're alone because there's no bodies around you. That's a false sense of being alone. You're never, ever alone, because number one, the Holy Spirit's always with you in your mind, and there are beings around you all the time you just can't see, and so you're never truly alone because all minds are joined. So when you remember those ideas, it can really help, and you can, make a different choice. You can even remind yourself, I'm choosing this, and be gentle and patient with yourself and loving. Remember that I don't have to choose the teacher of loneliness. I can acknowledge I feel it. You don't have to deny it, but just gently look at it, allow yourself to feel it, and just remind yourself, I can choose again whenever I'm ready. That choice is always there. So I just wanted to
thank you for that. And what that reminds me of is I think it was actually in high school. got a big piece of computer paper, and I wrote in big block letters, "I'm choosing to feel this way."
Oh,
And this is when I was first studying metaphysics, and before the course came out, and it was just kind of like this phrase that came to me, and I wrote this, had it, pinned up against the ceiling there, and I'd look up and I say, "I'm choosing to feel this way." And I noticed that when that was easy was when I was, quote, having a good day, and then I was like, "Yeah, I'm choosing to feel this way." But when it really was helpful, truly helpful, is when I was interpreting the events of the world as not going my way, and then I would look up at that and grit my teeth and say, "Damn it, that's still true." and that's when it started to sink in. It's like it really is a choice in the mind in any given moment, isn't it? I mean, and that's the choice that we all have, and that's the decision maker that the course talks about, and what both of you shared very eloquently and helpfully about today. So anyway, thank you so very much.
Good to talk to
oh
you.
yeah, it's been great. I just want to remind people, if they want to know what we're doing, whether it's online or in person or books or anything, you can go to our websites, which is GaryRenard.com and GaryRenard.com.
And you can find out if you want to join our online classes. We do 2 a month on different themes from the course. I have a lot of information on that on my website, cindylora.com. You can find out how to just become a subscriber, or we also have a pay-as-you-go option if you don't want to subscribe monthly. But we get pretty deep in these classes, and they're fun and good group of people. So if you're interested in that, just wanted to let you know about it.
Excellent. Yes, highly recommended.
Yeah, I might actually start doing workshops in person again as soon as September, but we'll see. We're playing it by ear.
That'll be on your events page, right? So
yeah,
great.
We'll see.
Super. Well,
Bruce, we just want to thank you.
Oh, likewise.
You've been a great friend over the years, and we always enjoy. We should do it more often. We always enjoy speaking with you. So.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks again. I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah.